Welcome to the My Hidden Talent workshop. I want to thank everybody who has been with us since the beginning. This is the 5th conference that we've done. I'm really excited, although there's a lot of changes this year. One thing that hasn't changed is the support that we have from our sponsors, the title sponsors, Delta Dental and DTE, supporting sponsor Meyer, who has made this possible. And we've got some great breakout sessions. We've got Temple Grandin, who is giving the keynote address, and I could not be more excited about that. She's a real hero of mine. But while those things remain the same, a lot of other things have changed, and we had to go virtual this time. I hope this is the only time we have to go virtual, but we know that the important work that has to be done to make the world a more inclusive place, it doesn't take time off for the pandemic. And so I'm Brian Calley, President of the Small Business Association of Michigan, and as always, I am joined by Richard Bernstein, who is a Justice of the Supreme Court, and he has been a partner in this effort right since the very beginning. Since you're living this every single day, life in the pandemic with a disability, maybe share a little bit about the difficulty of life at this time.
Brian, thank you so much. I think that the pandemic gives a greater sense of urgency and intensity to why this workshop is so absolutely critical. I think what people have to recognize when you talk about a pandemic and when you talk about people with disabilities, it is absolutely critical that we have the opportunity to interact with people, that we have the chance to be with people, that we have the chance to spend time with people. My hope is that once we kind of look at safety and realize that we're doing everything at the time that we need to do to keep people safe, that we look at this not as a new normal, but we look at this as a pause, and that the goal must be reunification. The goal must be that people have to be together. But ultimately, for people that have a disability, and especially for people who are blind, what is so imperative is that we simply cannot live in this current situation. We cannot live the way things currently are. Because if you take away people, for all intents and purposes, you remove all aspects and all elements that go into how someone like myself lives, appreciates, and ultimately values life.
And maybe speak then to a little bit of the role then that the workplace has to that connection with people. Imagine how wrapped up in our very identity is our job, our profession, this place that we go to make a living and to live productive, independent, self-determined lives. And there's even without the pandemic, there are so many people with disabilities that really haven't found or been able to find an opportunity to have a real career. And there's nothing about charity here. We're just talking about really hard-working people that are going to really appreciate the opportunity to go and be a part of a workforce.
So Brian, here's the thing, and I'm just going to be very personal. Here I am, I'm a Supreme Court justice, and I am telling you that this pandemic has been devastatingly isolating. That comes from the inability to be close to people. That comes from that notion of waking up in the morning and having the chance to go to your office, having that chance to spend time with people. And it's interesting, with my job, I am on my phone probably from 8 in the morning until 6 o'clock at night. The way that I'm able to appreciate people is through their energy. And I need to be next to someone. I need to be close to someone. I need to feel that person's energy. Because ultimately what happens is it's through energy that I'm able to have that genuine connection with you. And once things become at a certain point where we've achieved a certain level of safety, you are going to find that people with disabilities are going to lead the way in the reunification.
What I really love about everything you just said was that it illustrates the enthusiasm and the excitement that people with disabilities would naturally have toward joining the workforce, where you can be in and around and among people. So I think that this is going to be an opportunity. It's been really tough, but also an opportunity for people with disabilities to maybe get their place in line to get into the workplace?
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Brian. And what I think people have to remember about it is that just because you have a disability doesn't mean you have a comorbidity, right? Just because I'm blind, but I've still done 24 marathons, I've still done a full Ironman, I've still done a half Ironman. And what I do now is I walk 20 miles a day now, 20 miles a day. I take out my phone and I will work with my clerks and I will have them read to me all the materials and I'll dictate, the materials that I have to dictate, but we will do it all by phone while I'm walking. And what I'm saying is that everybody is different. Everybody is unique. Everybody is an individual. Someone with autism or someone with blindness still has a very strong, capable body. Allow for that person with a disability to tell you what their needs and what their issues are. And what I am willing to bet you are going to find is when this pandemic comes to a close and we are back in action and the world is back online and people are going back to life and we're living the way that we as humans are intended to live, then what you're going to find is that there's going to be a resource pool of people with disabilities and special needs that are going to be so excited and that are going to be so enthused and that are going to be so impassioned that they will do anything and everything possible to get out of their house and come back to the workforce.
So for everybody who's watching and about to participate in this conference, what do you think it would be like to have people on the workforce with a type of determination to get back at it like you just heard? I mean, that's the whole message about today, is that if you don't have people with disabilities in your workforce, you're missing out. You might not even know how big a deal it is that you're missing out on. So thank you for being a part of it. I know you're going to really love the breakouts and the keynote address that's coming up. And our goal is at the end of all of this that we will have from you a commitment to intentionally get out there and create a more inclusive work environment that includes people with disabilities. Have a great conference, everybody.
When it comes to Michigan's future, DTE is all in for you. So we're giving 2 million masks to frontline workers and 600,000 to small businesses as they reopen, helping over 500,000 families with meals and shelter, and leading a coalition to provide tablets and internet access to 51,000 school children so they can keep learning at home. DTE is all in for you. DTE.
Hello, I'm Lynette Dowler, Vice President of Public Affairs at DTE Energy and President of the DTE Energy Foundation. On behalf of DTE Energy and our company's 10,000 plus employees, and on behalf of the DTE Foundation, thank you for allowing me to say a few words today. It is my honor and pleasure expressing our gratitude and support for Michigan's Hidden Talent Workshop, which does incredible work helping organizations create a more inclusive workforce by hiring differently abled individuals. At DTE, this is something that's extremely important to us. One of our top priorities is building an inclusive and diverse workforce that brings a variety of experiences and perspective to work every single day. And at DTE, supporting differently abled people goes far beyond just complying. We embrace and harness the power of diversity. We truly understand and hold dear the unique differences, talents, and perspectives of all of our employees, customers, and suppliers, including and especially those who are differently abled. DTE has partnered for many years with Project Search, which helps differently abled students gain meaningful skills as they transition out of public schools. We are the only business to host these students in Detroit. Before graduation, we work with the students to create a video resume and portfolio that's posted on a job site that employers use to search for differently abled candidates. We also have a special partnership with the Autism Alliance of Michigan, AAOM. We work with the AAOM to recruit and place people with autism into employment opportunities here at our company, which includes student internships and temporary and full-time positions. Once an individual is hired, we offer support and networking opportunities throughout our employee resource groups. These are common interest groups that DTE employees can join for professional development, networking, best practice sharing, and awareness building. Our Abilities in Motion group promotes a culture that embraces differently abled people in an effort to inspire and advocate for a supportive, accommodating, safe, and welcoming workplace so everyone can advance their contribution at DTE Energy. We'll continue to work alongside you to create new opportunities for differently abled individuals. On behalf of DTE Energy and the DTE Foundation, I thank you for all you do to create a more equitable, vital Michigan that leverages the unique strengths and abilities of all of our friends, family members, and neighbors statewide. We appreciate your work and we're humbled and grateful to stand alongside you. Thank you.
Welcome to the virtual 2020 My Hidden Talent Workshop. It's made possible by our title sponsors, DTE, whom you just heard from, but also Delta Dental, and we'll hear from them a little later on in the program. When Justice Richard Bernstein and I started this effort, we had a vision of creating workplaces that are more inclusive and value people with disabilities. While there has been progress, there are still more than 400,000 people with disabilities who are not working, and many of them want to. We at SBAM understand how tough this year has been on all business owners. And a big part of that difficulty has been finding the right talent to get businesses back up and running. And that's why we feel it's so important to host the My Hidden Talent Workshop this year. Because you need talented employees just as much as workers with disabilities want to be given a chance to succeed in the workplace. We have a packed agenda for you today, and it's going to be a great event. I couldn't be more excited about really one of my heroes, Dr. Temple Grandin, keynoting today's event. Not only did she not let her disability keep her from being successful, but she literally revolutionized an industry with her unique way of thinking. Like past years, the Michigan Rehabilitation Services continues to be our partner in providing trainings for My Hidden Talent. This year, we'll learn best practices for working together virtually during these times, and then also hear about mental health and mindfulness, which are essential to stress management during the pandemic. Even though this is an online event, it will still be interactive. So I encourage you to ask questions during the presentations. So enter your questions using the chat function or the Ask a Question button below. We'll ask them to our presenters and our keynote. You will have an opportunity to ask Temple Grandin questions, but we'll do so right after their presentations. We'll get to as many questions as we can and make sure that you have the contact information for MRS presenters if we run out of time. Again, thank you for taking the first step, or maybe it's the next step in creating a more inclusive workplace. And special thanks to our incredible sponsors who make this event possible. Delta Dental and DTE, our title sponsors, Meyer, a silver sponsor, and our production sponsor, Message Makers, who have been producing this event literally since the very first one 5 years ago. To get started with this first training session on working together virtually, I'd like to introduce Claudette Reed and Amy Hayes from the Michigan Rehabilitation Services. Hello, Claudette. Amy.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please take it away.
All right. Good morning. My name is Claudette Reed. I'm an occupational therapist with the Business Network Division of Michigan Rehabilitation Services. And I'm here today to present information regarding the virtual workplace format with my colleague Amy.
Good morning. My name is Amy Hayes, and I'm also an occupational therapist with the Business Network Division of Michigan Rehabilitation Services. Welcome.
Okay, can we have the presentation up? Our presentation today has 3 objectives. You will learn how to increase the engagement of your employees with different abilities in a virtual setting. The discussion will address universal design tips to empower all employees during virtual meetings and trainings. and we will address challenges to workers with disabilities created by COVID-19 pandemic, which are particularly difficult to accommodate. Couple of housekeeping items before we dive into the content today. Please turn off your video and keep your microphone muted during the presentation. That will help with clear sound for all participants. Type any questions you have during the training into the chat box. We hope we will have time at the end of the presentation to address those questions. We will send out a Q&A document to all participants to address any questions we can't get to at the end. And finally, this presentation is the property of the Business Network Division of MRS, Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity. No part of the presentation may be reproduced or shared in whole or in part in any manner without prior written consent. Amy?
This is Amy. So why meet virtually? It allows us to continue to work, right? It allows us to be here today for the Hidden Talent Workshop, which is just awesome. I've been part of this for many years, and it's different this year, but we're making it happen, right? And it just gives us purpose. That's why we meet virtually. We need to continue to work together as a team. It expedites communication and processes. And the social connection has huge health benefits, as we know. Face-to-face, that social connection can lower anxiety and depression. It helps us regulate our emotions. It leads to higher self-esteem and empathy. And the studies show that it actually improves our immune system. So social distancing and the use of masks, they raise barriers for some workers that are reduced or eliminated in a well-structured virtual environment. Research also shows us that loneliness, unfortunately, is on the rise, and that lack of human connection can be more harmful to our health than obesity, smoking, and high blood pressure. Next slide, please. So what can we do virtually? Obviously, we can hold workshops, we can do trainings. We've seen some that are live and also pre-recorded. It allows us to continue to do staff meetings, administrative updates to staff, and project development. It also allows us to address personnel issues, human relations issues, and also workstation assessments for accommodations. The Business Network Division, that's one thing we pride ourselves is helping individuals with disabilities with accommodations. And pre-COVID, workstation assessments were done in person, and we would identify and implement accommodations while we were at the work site, get in our car and drive there, do it statewide. And now our cars are sitting. So what are we doing? We're doing it virtually. It's not quite the same. We do it with some limitations. The things that we can't do right now is actually have individuals trial equipment, such as trackballs, software, alternative keyboards, and trial chairs. But we still are able to meet some needs and provide accommodations for individuals. And one thing that's worked really well is having the individual send us pictures ahead of time of their now home workstation. We have a new form that we developed. So we're just trying to do things a little bit differently to meet the needs of businesses. And a new question that has kind of arisen for businesses, some folks are starting to transition to the office a couple of days a week and then also working at home. So how are those accommodations being handled? Are they being duplicated? Is that feasible? So those are just some things for businesses to consider and think about right now. Claudette.
Business functions into a virtual environment, we should stop and ask whether the new way of working is accessible to all of your team members. An accommodation is a modification in the way that an essential job task is performed to allow a person with a disability to successfully complete that task. It is very specific to the person, their functional limitation, and the task requirements. It is a response to a worker being unable to do their job due to their disability. Accessibility is something undertaken to be sure that everyone is able to participate fully in an activity. It addresses the structure to eliminate barriers before they cause a problem. Accessibility, also called universal design, makes an activity or content available to everyone at the same time. It can improve the process for all team members, not just those with disabilities. The key point to remember is that accessibility is the goal. Accommodations are just tools that are used to reach that goal. Pre-pandemic, when we were meeting face-to-face, you may have provided some accommodations to team members with disabilities to allow them to fully participate in meetings and other work activities. Here's a partial list of things that you might have implemented for in-person meetings. Persons who were hard of hearing or deaf might have used sign language interpreters, real-time captioning or CART, automated speech recognition for live captioning, and assistive listening devices like FM receivers or microphones and speakers. Workers who are visually impaired or who have significant physical limitations may have used a service provider, such as a sighted guide or a personal assistant. Captioning or video content is beneficial for persons with attention deficit as well as hearing impairments. Providing documents before the meeting in alternative formats such as Braille, large print, audio, and electronic, and providing written notes following the meeting have been beneficial for team members with a range of different disabilities. The key point is what we use for in-person accommodations can be used for virtual meetings, with a few exceptions. Amy?
Speaking. So obviously you want to plan ahead. This production has had a lot of planning, and that's what you need to do to make things run smoothly. You want to identify the platform to be used. And as we're learning, there's a lot of platforms out there. vMix Call, Microsoft Teams, Zoom. And how do you pick a platform? None of the virtual meeting platforms are perfect. You want to check with your agency or organization to identify which platform you already have access to. And some platforms are even different, business accounts versus government accounts. You want to check on that to make sure you know what you can work with. You want to engage people with disabilities to test and evaluate those platforms with you. Also implement meeting management strategies to compensate for weaknesses in the platform, and utilize other services as possible to compensate for those weaknesses, such as separate captioning, streaming website, a hand-raising tool, and schedule those practice sessions. It includes interpreters if they'll be used. And if the meeting's going to be recorded, find out who will receive the recording, where and how will it be archived, and how are you going to view it later. So those are all things to consider. And one of the handouts that we'll be providing is kind of a pros and cons handout of several different virtual platforms that are out there right now. And some we've used and some we haven't. So it's all one of those things that we're continuing to learn and use and trial. And we have those technology glitches. That's just part of having a virtual life right now.
Members who access documents differently may require additional time, so it's important to distribute documents like the agenda well in advance of the actual meeting. Consider the format of documents, making sure they're accessible to all participants. Graphic design elements may make it difficult for tools, such as a screen reader, to distinguish the flow of the words, so a plain text version may be easier for some. Large print or Braille may also be needed. Information that is provided in pictures including tables and charts, need to have multiple ways to be accessed by everyone. This might include captioning for videos, alternative text to describe pictures and charts. A description of visual elements should be part of the presentation when those elements are conveying information necessary for understanding the content. And on this slide, you can see that there is a photo that shows some captioning. Providing a brief login instruction every time you have a virtual meeting or training provides support for team members who are not tech savvy or who have trouble learning new information. An agenda should identify a clear start and end time. You may also want to estimate the time for each topic so the group works efficiently and completes all their tasks. Things which cannot be completed should be deferred to a specific future meeting if possible. This way they don't get lost. Most groups have norms, whether they know it or not. Norms are the implicit rules of how to behave in that group. Making your group's meeting norms explicit will help the entire team know what is being expected of them. The team should work to develop their own meeting norms, and they will be different for every group. However, there are some that are fairly universal. One speaker at a time, no sidebar conversations. Come prepared to address the agenda. Do your homework. Listen respectfully to all points of view. And this one is something we would like to see become more common for virtual meetings because sitting and focusing on your computer for long periods can be cognitively and physically draining. Meetings longer than 1 hour should have a set break or a stretch period. There are some important roles that people need to fulfill to have any meeting in person or virtually run smoothly. You may call them something different, but I'm sure you already are using something like this. A leader or organizer is the person who makes arrangements for the virtual meeting room, sends out the invitations and login instructions, and develops and sends out the agenda and any other supporting materials, and lets people know if they will be responsible for a portion of the agenda so that they can prepare for that. I'm going to jump over facilitator right now. We'll address that in a minute. The chat moderator is specific role to virtual meetings. Questions and important information that is placed in the chat by participants are addressed by the chat moderator. The moderator may answer the questions or refer them to the presenter immediately or at the end of the meeting. Their role is to make sure in this second level of communication that's happening at the same time that nothing important slips through the cracks. The recording secretary takes minutes that are thorough enough to assist persons who may have some difficulty following the conversation to fully understand what was said. In addition, any action items are clearly identified, including the task to be completed, by whom, by when, and what kind of support is needed. Minutes should be distributed to all invitees as soon as possible after the meeting is finished. If you don't get the minutes from the last meeting until right before the next meeting, they're really not much use. Tech support is something that is also specific to virtual meetings. Sooner or later, the technology is going to get to be a problem. Knowing who can address this and how to access them quickly can salvage a meeting. Remember, it's not a question with the technology if it will fail, but simply when it's going to fail. It's important that someone agree to be a timekeeper to assure that the meeting moves along and ends on time. That could be the chat moderator, the recording secretary, or another person. The facilitator is technically not part of the participant group. They may offer reflections, summarize, or identify when a discussion point appears to be reaching consensus, but they generally do not participate in the discussion themselves. Large groups may hire an outside person to act as the meeting facilitator, but in most business meetings, the person who does this is also part of the group. If a facilitator wishes to participate in the discussion of an issue, they should make the fact that they are changing roles from facilitator to acting as a participant very explicit. Essentially, announce that they're now speaking as one of the group and not as the group facilitator. They should also limit jumping into the discussion if possible, only doing so in situations where an important point of discussion would be missed otherwise.
This is Amy speaking. So starting a virtual meeting, obviously you want to start on time and be respectful of that. Review those rules and norms like Claudette talked about. You want to provide technical information at the beginning of the meeting or at the start, such as the examples to the right. Some of the examples to the right include exercise patience, always, with technology, microphones on mute, and you want to unmute during the Q&A portion of the training. Put questions or comments in the chat box. If time does not allow to answer all the questions and comments, let them know. Follow-up will be provided after the training. And one thing that's really important is turning off the video feature when you're not requiring it, and then resume the video during the Q&A. And also let your attendees know if the session is going to be recorded. So next slide is tips for virtual meetings. You want to stay on topic for ease of communication. Identify yourself before you begin to speak, such as I am doing. This is Amy speaking. Have a clear process for taking turns. Some platforms, such as Microsoft Teams, has the little raise your hand feature, and we use that, and that really helps and it's respectful. Check in beforehand and ask for feedback. At the beginning of the meeting, take a minute to ask all the attendees to see if they have what they need for effective communication, including interpreters, CART, the real-time captioning. And as far as feedback, provide a meeting evaluation tool, such as SurveyMonkey, and specifically solicit feedback on accessibility of the meeting. That's really helpful to know what is working well and what is not working so well. Check in beforehand and ask for that feedback. You want to limit the screen sharing. Screen share content is not accessible to screen reader users, and they can take up space on the screen, which can be important and needed. Use with caution and consider toggling shared content on and off when needed, such as agendas, reports, and other documents. And if you can, get those out ahead of time. Best practice is to have these items distributed at least 24 hours before your meeting is starting. A few more tips. As far as fine-tuning your audio and video, use a headset when possible and only use one audio connection, only one method, the phone or computer, not both, because you'll get that screaming or feedback or echoing. Some other things to fine-tune your video. You want to frame your shot. If you're using the built-in camera on the laptop, place the laptop on a stand or a box so the camera is about eye level, so you are not being viewed from below. Also, make sure that your entire head is included in the shot. Make sure you can be seen well. And be careful that others are not moving behind you. Kids, cats, dogs, especially them, can draw everyone's focus away. And be careful that you're not backlit, such as sitting in front of a bright window. You want to provide some front lighting, which can help reduce this kind of problem. Consider autofocus if that's available. And consider turning off video, like I said, when it's not required. Another tip is provide multiple connection options, and you want to keep it flexible by allowing attendees to use different connections. It might be IP audio, could be their phone audio, audio only, or video only. And different ASR programs, which is audio speech recognition programs, perform differently. Google Meet Up may interpret speech to text differently than Microsoft Teams might. For an example, the combining of words or using different words together.
The online platform that your virtual meetings are hosted on can create some challenges for your workers with disabilities. We have provided a handout that highlights the pros and cons of several popular platforms. Please realize that all the platforms are competing for your business and are changing or adding features very quickly to meet the demand for a robust online option for businesses. The handout is a guide, but it may be out of date quickly if it isn't already. Platform limitations are something that you want to consider. Technical issues will show up as not all platforms are the same. For example, some platforms are better at live captioning than others, and some don't provide real-time captioning at all. Entry-level products often have limits, like meeting length and the number of participants that need to be taken into consideration. Environmental limitations include security issues, including the safety of documents online and the ability of others to join uninvited, also known as Zoom bombing. Budgetary issues are a consideration, as there's a greater cost for systems with greater levels of sophistication and options. Concerned about licensing limitations indicate that features are not uniform in different packages, so the platform that one company uses may be somewhat different than the same brand platform that another company uses. For example, some have more or better features at a higher tier and cost than the lower tier licenses that are low cost or free. Having diverse access methods is extremely important. Can your platform be accessed using different interfaces? This is important because if you have workers who are blind or visually impaired, they may be accessing only the auditory information, and workers who are deaf only access the visual information. Inconsistent user experience with some is true because some platforms just perform better than others. The platform may have limited tech support available, or the support is not easy to access when you actually need it. As far as accommodations, sometimes they can cause a conflict as well. For example, some interpreter and cart captioning services may not work well together on the same platform. This could be caused by limitations in bandwidth and screen space available on a given platform. A lack of user experience or training can result in problems caused by user error. Identifying internal resources for tech support who are familiar with your platform is essential. And you always want to be nice to your tech support. It's not all bad news, though. There are some real advantages to using virtual meetings to interface. Interface customization is available to all. That means that users can control some of the assistive technology that is built into the system, such as increasing or decreasing the font size, changing contrast, changing color. You can also turn on auto captioning for some of the platforms. You're able to pin a window in one place, which would be used if there's going to be a sign language interpreter. The virtual platforms provide a much richer interaction as opposed to a conference call telephone style of meeting. And you're able to share written and video documents, and you're able to see faces as well as hear voices. It also provides for an expanded pool of participants. Participation is not limited by geographic distance. We're able to have Dr. Grandin here today from Colorado, and we're all sitting here in Michigan. There's no commuting time when you have virtual meetings, and you have a fuller participation from a much more diverse group of participants. Amy?
Those are definitely benefits of virtual meetings. So next we're going to talk about accommodations related to COVID-19 precautions. So we have new precautions in place put out by the CDC. Employees must follow the current guidelines when in the work site or community. Masks, distancing, at least that 6 feet, hand washing. But what if their disability creates a barrier? So masks and individuals with hearing loss during COVID-19 has really increased some stress and anxiety. They cannot see the speaker's lips if they're wearing a mask. The speech is muffled by a mask. Some studies have shown that the cloth mask can reduce the sound by 3 decibels, and the N95 mask reduce it by 12 decibels. It's harder to hear at a safe social distance. I've noticed that as well. Sometimes I'm leaning in and saying, can you repeat that, please? Mask elastic interferes with behind the ear hearing aids. We only have so much real estate behind that ear. And they cannot see the expression of someone using American Sign Language to communicate. And on average, a person typically waits about 7 years to see an audiologist once they start noticing some hearing loss. And I know people are noticing that more pronounced now, and they may be getting assistance earlier with having the masks on, the plexiglass, the social distance. All those are increasing barriers. So some possible accommodations: communication partners wearing clear shields or clear masks or masks with clear windows, that could help. Maybe temporary reassignment to eliminate or reduce interaction with the public and coworkers. And adjusting hearing aid settings and or using additional amplification devices that work with the hearing aids. This would be coordinated by the audiologist. As we know, hearing aids, there's different models, different types. So that's really important to have that assessment done with the audiologist. So what can a business do to accommodate a worker? Actually, the Business Network Division recently had some involvement with a similar case regarding a salesperson in a retail setting. A big part of the assistance that was provided was just having that conversation with the client customer about the options that may be available to assist them on the job. We also advise the business to ensure whatever accommodation was decided on in the end, that it should be documented, agreed upon by both the business and the employee in writing. I will reiterate the importance of the interactive process with this scenario. Ask the individual what works for them. There could be numerous other forms of communication that could help a worker in this situation, including handwritten notes, maybe texts, or communicating via email. In smaller settings, options could include maybe all employees wearing the clear shields or clear masks, or the masks with the clear windows. In larger settings, this may not be feasible and could truly cause a hardship for an employer to provide this accommodation. So other options should be explored. Is it possible that a temporary reassignment would eliminate or reduce interactions with customers and coworkers? It is also possible in this scenario and many others that using reassignment would eliminate or reduce interactions with customers and coworkers, and that using some form of leave may be a reasonable accommodation. Another recommendation is to refer an employee who uses hearing aids, again, back to their audiologist. The audiologist can help with adjusting the settings on the hearing aids or using that additional amplification device that would work with that specific model. This service is very individualized when it comes to adjusting a person's hearing aids to provide the best performance possible in the workplace. The end goal, of course, is being that the employee can maintain their employment and meet the needs of the business that they are working for. So some COVID-19 solutions for mask wearers with hearing aids. For over-the-ear hearing aids, using a mask that ties rather than elastic going around the ears can work for some. For persons who wears a cochlear implant and glasses and then adding the mask, that creates even a more crowded headspace. So the ties might work well. Another option is to sew buttons onto a head wrap to wrap the elastic around the ears. The placement of the button is important so it does not interfere with the hearing aid. Often people were having their hearing aids pop in and out or losing them, which is hundreds to thousands of dollars. So this is a possible solution.
There are some smartphone apps that can be used to assist in facilitating communication. A speech to text, such as Google Live Transcribe, available on Android, Ava, or Otter, are some programs. The speaker in your smartphone can be used to amplify voices that are hard to hear. You can improve the ability of your phone to pick up speech at a distance with a microphone that attaches wirelessly to your smartphone, such as the Aled Nolan Live MIC2. Or you can use a plug-in microphone compatible with your smartphone. Many people think that hearing aids are like glasses. You put them on and they totally correct the problem. Unfortunately, that is not true. Hearing aids can improve a person's hearing, but seldom do they totally correct it. There are ways to improve how well hearing aids work in some situations. A microphone that receives and transmits voices to the hearing aid over a longer distance can be used, such as the Roger pen. The ability to amplify sounds that are picked up by a remote transmitter, such as using a portable FM device. Success with these types of devices depends on the type and the extent of hearing loss and the specific brand and model of hearing aid being used. An audiologist can identify and help to set up compatible devices. Persons with hearing impairments benefit from other input when they're conversing. So first you want to get their attention. You can wave or tap them on the shoulder so that they know that you're saying something before you start talking. Ask them how to best communicate. They have been dealing with this for years, and they are the experts on what works best for them. Speak clearly and directly to them. If they read lips, look directly at the person and speak clearly, slowly, and expressively. Face the light source and keep your hands, cigarettes, food away from your mouth when you're speaking. And look directly at and speak to the person, not to their sign language interpreter. Be patient. You may need to repeat yourself to be fully understood. And try rephrasing your comments using different words if repeating isn't effective. Amy?
Okay, so mask and employees with respiratory disabilities or anxiety disorders. Masks increase resistance to airflow, making it more difficult to breathe. Less oxygen is brought in when wearing a mask, and the perception that you cannot breathe can trigger a panic attack for some. So some accommodations could include flexible breaks to receive fresh air, permitting that telework, or temporarily reassigning to a role that will allow the ability to telework or limit the need to wear a mask. Accommodation solutions should be considered on an individualized and case-by-case basis. And Claude's going to go into a little bit more detail of some accommodations to consider.
Okay. You can have an insert placed inside your mask. These are plastic or silicone domed inserts that hold the fabric away from the user's nose and mouth and make it easier to breathe. Cloth or disposable masks with 2 or more layers should be used. Do not use N95 masks. These are currently reserved for medical personnel and first responders, and they provide a greater resistance to breathing. Face shields, bandanas, and neck gaiters are not approved by the CDC as a replacement for a mask. Research on these is ongoing. They can be used as an accommodation for persons who cannot wear a cloth mask due to their disability. You want to check with your local health department on these options to a cloth mask. Eliminate the need for wearing a mask temporarily. Taking breaks in an isolated area where the mask can be removed can give a needed pause for workers. Or you can eliminate the need for a mask at all by working in a separate area where others don't come in, or working from home. Amy?
Hey, this is Amy. So as we know, the workplace is changing. Let's make it a change for the better. I know we gave you lots of information this morning, and just keep an open mind. We need to reach out to our resources. We don't need to know it all or have all the answers. Utilize your resources and stay connected, whether that be virtually or in person. Many of the resources that we utilize and that you should be aware of. Can you have the next slide, please?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. The EEOC is a wealth of information. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Michigan Occupation Safety and Health Administration, MIOSHA. The Michigan Chamber of Commerce website. There's also how to make an accessible, deaf-friendly face mask. And last but not least, the Job Accommodation Network, ideas for employees who are deaf or hard of hearing. All these agencies have a wealth of information on their website and are continuing to monitor our progress this pandemic. So utilize the resources, and the Business Network Division is here for you, and we'd like to entertain some questions right now. Please let us know if you have any questions for Claudette and I that we can answer.
All right, thank you so much for that presentation. A ton of information. And I thought I'd start out with a couple of questions, but remind people that you can enter a question in the chat function or the Ask a Question box, and we'll get to it if we can. We just have a few minutes here, but I wanted to reinforce one point. First is that, or mainly is that the first step about making an accommodation is asking the person, what would you like or what do you need? Sometimes employers feel like they have to come up with the solution all on their own without actually communicating with the individual. But let's say a business notices that there's a business owner notices that there's a challenge or a question, and they ask the individual, and now they need a little bit of help in making that accommodation. How would a business go about getting access to the experts at MRS to have an evaluation done and taking that next step and solving some of the problems that come with communication?
Brian, thanks for asking that question. The Americans with Disabilities Act has identified the whole process of how a reasonable accommodation is supposed to happen. And a big part of that is the interactive process. That's where the business, the supervisor, and the person with a disability are talking about what the issues are, what limitations the person may have, and what are possible accommodations. Now, often the person with a disability has a great deal of information about what has worked for them in other situations that they can bring to that discussion. Sometimes they don't really know what the best option is going to be. And so at that point, the business can bring in experts in that area to be able to talk about what options there may be and to increase the opportunities there. That's where the Business Network Division can come in. So the individual with a disability or the business can approach Michigan Rehabilitation Services in order to get some support for identifying possible accommodations. This is something that we're working with on a virtual basis right now because we can't get into everybody's workplace. And we've still been able to provide a lot of great accommodations that allow people with disabilities to be able to be functional in their workplaces, whether those are virtual workplaces or on site.
Great. Well, thanks for that insight. And so the main message is that you're not on your own in figuring this out, that there is a network of people available at Michigan Rehabilitation Services that can help you evaluate different options and solutions. But of course, it starts with that conversation with the employee themselves. The other point I wanted to bring out and highlight is that many of the things that you would do to make an accommodation for a person with a disability actually make the workplace work better for all employees. And so I thought about the tips on communicating with a person who's hard of hearing, to be expressive, to look directly at them when talking, to enunciate better. You know, I know from all my years in public office that all of those things make you a better communicator to everyone, not just a person with disabilities. I wonder if you might provide just a little bit of insight as we close down this session on this idea that accommodations that you explore and make for a person with a disability, how that might benefit the entire workforce.
Thanks, Brian. I think that it is important that we realize accommodations really are something that is specific to a person with a disability, but having a much more accessible environment, a universal design that allows everybody to participate, is something that's very proactive. It allows us to be able to make the environment such that it's easier for everyone. In a meeting kind of a situation, being really clear about information that's provided ahead of time and making sure it's available in whatever format people need to use it is an example of something that's going to help everyone in the meeting. If you've got information up front, you're going to be a lot more productive in being able to address the business of the meeting, so that everything that we're talking about is going to be good for the entire group as well as for the person with a disability.
Well, thank you so much for your insight and your expertise, and also keep in mind, everybody who's watching, that we will at the end provide communication contact information for MRS so that you can go directly to them for help on any number of issues that you might face as you go along this journey. Now, before we get to our keynote address, which I know we're all really excited for, we are going to hear from title sponsor Delta Dental, who is back this year again as title sponsor after our great event last year. So please take it away from Delta Dental.